Hello and welcome to today's webinar on monetizing your IoT offering. My name is Jeremy Cowan. I'm editorial director and co-founder of IoT Now, and I'm your moderator today. I want to thank the hundreds of you who are joining us live today all around the world. We've got a very important discussion for you, brought to you by Flexera software and with independent analysis from Beecham Research. As ever, we have a lot of expertise to call on. First, I'd like to introduce you to Robin Duke-Woolley, who is CEO of Beecham Research, as he will be our first speaker. Hi, Robin.
Hi, Jeremy. Thanks very much. Very good to be here.
Good to have you. Next, let me welcome Eddie MacNeil, Practice Manager for Software Monetization Solutions at Flexera Software. It's really good to have you here, Ed.
Thanks, Jeremy. It's good to have the opportunity to share our experience.
You're welcome. Today we are analyzing the adoption and impact of the industrial Internet of Things, or let's just call it IoT. We will also be tackling the challenges that companies are facing worldwide when shifting from a physical to a digital business model, and how they can implement revenue models based on usage, time, or value. This webinar is being recorded and you will be able to access it in 48 hours or less via iot-now.com. Before we start, I just want to remind you that this webinar is interactive and we really want to know what matters to you. So please start sending us your questions now, and later on I'll put these questions to our panel. I should add that for logistical reasons, to get everyone together at the same time, the speakers have been pre-recorded. However, your questions will be answered live, and it's for that reason that Ed can't be with us today to take your questions. So questions to Flexera software will be taken by the company's EMEA marketing manager, Nicole Segera, who we will speak to later. Meanwhile, send me your questions now, and you can carry on sending them at any time in the webinar. Just click on the questions button and type your question into the window. I will put as many to our speakers as time allows. And of course, if you're having any technical issues with audio or slides, you can always use the question window to get advice from our technical support team. Now, in this one-hour webinar, we want to discuss people's monetization troubles in IoT. That means finding out how to monetize your services successfully, discussing trends, challenges, and opportunities in the industrial IoT, hearing about best practices for removing IoT roadblocks, and seeing how others have implemented new revenue models, as well as learning how software monetization can drive new business models. All of which means it's time to hear more from the first of our panel, Robin Duke-Woolley from Beecham Research. After which Robin will hand straight over to Eddie MacNeil from Flexera Software. Robin, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Jeremy. Yes, I'm just going to give a short introduction before we get on to the main Flexera presentation, monetizing your IoT offering. So on my first here, why connect things anyway? Where's the value? What's it really all about? So this diagram shows that when products, devices are not connected, then all the value resides in the device itself. So when it's sold, that's really where all the profits come. Once you connect it, then the whole situation changes, and in addition to the sale, which might then be moved into some sort of other business model, but the profits can also come from consumables, services, and content associated with that device. And then the opportunity is for the device itself to become secondary to the value it brings to the customer, and it can become a way to deliver the service. And then the services themselves become a means to cultivate an ongoing customer relationship. Now that sounds a little bit theoretical, so it's useful to give an example. An example that we use quite often for this type of situation, so the MRI scanners as an outsourced solution, because they've been around for quite some time. And initially, they were a huge capital investment for hospitals and medical clinics, so they didn't buy very many. And of course, that's not very good for the product manufacturers. So the business model changed, and they are now connected devices. They're monitored remotely by the product manufacturers, and it's then up to the product manufacturers themselves to make sure that they are working all the time. And then they are charged, their use is charged on a per-use basis. So the hospital itself is then charged for each scan they do, each use. And that gives them the opportunity to, if necessary or if possible, to charge the client, charge the customer, charge the patient for that scan as well. So they can then either break even or maybe even make a profit if that is possible in their particular environment. So that has completely changed the way that type of device works in the marketplace. And then the product manufacturer is then responsible for making sure that the device is always working, that the consumables, in this case nitrogen gas, which needs to be replenished, and other aspects, and then the physical parts to be replaced and so forth. They need to monitor that and make sure that everything works. So basically what this means is that by connecting it, you have introduced a completely new business model that is as a result of connecting to the internet. So what does that mean in terms of a network to device generally? What value does that bring throughout the life cycle? And there are opportunities for providing value for the device or from the device throughout its life cycle. So this diagram is really intended to show that at each point of the life cycle for the device, the design, the sale, the build, the install, startup, operation, maintenance, there is data that can be derived from the device that you would not otherwise get, and you're using the same connection that was used in the first place. So that could be for sales and marketing efforts, it could be for product development purposes, improvements of the product itself and its operation in the field, or it could be customer service. So there's all of these things are possible once you have a connection. And what does that mean in terms of the generality of the marketplace? Well, this diagram we show a lot, and this is our segmentation of the overall M2M and IoT marketplace. We have 9 key sectors, so which you can see in the center of the chart. There's buildings, energy, consumer and home, healthcare and life science, industrial, transportation, retail, security and public safety, and then IT and networks. And then on the outside, in very little writing, which you can't see, are the types of devices within each of those sectors. And these are the things that are actually connected. So taking buildings, it's like HVAC, so air conditioning, connecting up the air conditioning system and providing new services through that. And then also with all of the other items, and that's all the way around the chart. So what you get from this is that there are a very large number of potential applications that can be moved into services as part of the development of the IoT market. And we draw a distinction between M2M, which is a traditional way of looking at things, and IoT, and that's also worth just explaining, because IoT we're seeing is providing a greater richness of data for these types of applications. So in the diagram here, it shows data coming from typically one source. It's coming through one type of connection and going to one type of processing at the center. This is a very sort of silo-based. And this is the typical M2M type of approach, which is very closely linked typically to enterprise operations, enterprise processes. And this is the way that the market has really grown up. So it's a very unitary type of approach, and information around the device that may have a bearing on it is not really typically taken into account. But then moving on to an IoT type of situation, and then you might be drawing information in from a number of different sectors to provide more understanding, more insight for what's going on in that particular environment. Now that could be a machine, and it could be the environmental data surrounding it. It could be, in this case, much more of a smart city type of application, which is then looking at perhaps traffic information as well as pollution information and of course building information, but basically bringing it all together. And then looking at where that will go in terms of innovation, in terms of new types of models. We've shown something in the healthcare sector with the type of MRI scanners that have been shown there. There are lots of other operations that can also be systematized in similar ways. Manufacturing is also a very key area, and in the next presentation I think we'll get into more detail of that. A future one that is beginning to be looked at in the marketplace is insurance, and the opportunities that can provide also for new forms of services. So I'm now going to hand over to Eddie MacNeil, from Flexera, and he's going to provide us with the real detail of where this can lead to in new business models and planning of the business in the future.
Thank you, Robin. So I'm Eddie MacNeil. I'm going to take you through some of our experience at Flexera Software of monetizing IoT offerings and ensuring that you have a successful transformation program. So typically we work in the industrial IoT space, and typically the industrial market is very hardware based. We're now seeing the move strategically from hardware only to a hardware plus software plus connectivity. And this is what we see as industrial IoT. I suppose the biggest market we see at the moment is the building automation market and also the medical market, as Robin mentioned earlier. So going from hardware only to hardware plus software plus connectivity provides these customers in this market with a lot of opportunities. It provides them the opportunity to introduce new revenue models, but also enables them to introduce themselves into new markets and develop new ecosystems. Now, with the opportunities come challenges. So the challenges are new competitors within their space, and often the reason that they are moving to hardware plus software plus connectivities is because there are software-only competitors within their market space that are eroding their markets. It's also confusing for a business that has been 150 years, who's been developing hardware and shipping hardware and selling hardware, to understand how they're going to sell hardware plus software so they can actually go from a cost plus model to a value-based model. And it gives them a lot of different potential new business models that they could use. And a lot of the reason they are conscious of some of the complexities is because they don't really know why they need to move to those models. The third aspect is data. As Robin mentioned, the data is actually connecting different segments within the industries. And this is allowing them to consolidate that data in a big data format to understand how the products can work together. These are all feed into new business models that are being created within the industry. Some of the new business models that we're seeing in the marketplace are really driven by 4 different components. So you can't look at just the revenue model as the only part of the business model. You need to reassess all parts of the organization. So it's fundamentally transforming the way that the traditional hardware businesses increase their revenues, increase their EBITDA, and increase their market share or increase their market position. Those who are failing to put in a place of transformation program sponsored by a senior executive that's able to pull in resources from all parts of the business and put the success of transformation at risk. So first ask why. What's the vision? Why are you trying to change your business model? Is it due to new revenue streams that need to come into the business? Is it customer insights, so you're getting driven by your customer to produce new business models? Is it competitive pressure, so you're being your market's being eroded by software-only producers? Is it new market introduction, so you're trying to diversify into new markets? Or is it market dominance, so it's bringing out new products and new initiatives and being first to market with the new initiatives? Then ask how. How do you put the changes in place? How does it affect the current business and the current culture? How are you going to roll this out to the current or new marketplace? So have a look at your value chain and how that's going to react to new business models that are being introduced. Then ask what. So what needs to change in your products? So this is more about what you have in your own control. So what needs to change in your processes? What needs to change in your back office systems? And who's going to support it? And where are you going to get the sponsorship that you need? Then you need to have a look at who. So who do you need to influence? Do you need to influence sales to change from a hardware-based sales strategy to a software-based sales strategies? And often this is one of the biggest hurdles we find our customers encounter, and because it is such a huge culture change for them. So it's a process that needs to be put in place. Are the suppliers ready? Is your distribution channel ready? Is your distribution channel just a man in a van delivering a piece of hardware, or are they more capable and being able to support your software as well as the hardware and the services as well that are associated with that? Are your customers ready? Often you'll be driven by customers to change your model. They may want to change from a capital expenditure type model, which is a perpetual license, to a more predictable operational expenditure model. So you really do need to understand why you're actually doing this big transformation of the business. So we see a maturity model within the industrial IoT space, and this starts off near term with some very quick wins. So operational efficiency, and the operational efficiency really is making sure that your back office systems are really optimized to be able to grow your business. So we don't see that the operational efficiency much as a business case to invest and grow the business until they have a foundation on which to build. You wouldn't build a house on a constantly changing foundation. So they need to build that foundation, which is where that level 1 we advise customers to make sure they have a very solid operational efficiency program that is in place. Then it's being able to introduce new products and services. So we looked at pay-per-use in Robin's presentation, and software-based services, and also the monetizing the actual data that is coming out of your products as well. So by that we mean taking the data and the data intelligence that is coming out of your products, and really understanding how your customers are using the products. And you may find that there's some unintentional usage of the products, which will actually develop into new product lines. Then we look at the third aspect, which is really where we want to get customers to, which is the outcome economy. So it's a business outcome economy. Where do your customers want to be? What are they actually trying to get value from? And how can you really make a success out of your products? And a lot of that is about paper outcome. So we talked about paper use in the medical industry, where you're having a paper scan, or you're really understanding what equipment needs to go back into or what parts need to go back into the products. What this means is that the connected ecosystems really help you to provide the total outcome that the customers are looking for. And we're seeing a lot of our customers start to build their own ecosystems, with what was traditionally their competitors, because they now understand that actually working together on a bigger environment will benefit them more greatly. And then we have the autonomous pull economy. The autonomous pull economy isn't for all businesses, and I should state that these levels of maturity won't fit every business, because the infrastructure has to be in place as well, and the process has to be in place as well. So you don't want to you should have a vision to move up the maturity model. And really the maturity model you should look at first and really focus on is the outcome economy, the business outcome, what your customers are actually trying to achieve. So what's the role of software monetization in all this? So as an example, if we have a look at the Thermostat Business, what we're really looking at is, if you have a look at the industrial hardware survey that came out a couple of years ago, that really showed that only 1% of industrial manufacturers said that revenue streams or new revenue streams are not important, because they're seeing such a huge demand in the consumer industry. And you can see over nearly 3/4 of the respondents said it's very important or extremely important, which means it's important for their business to survive in the future. So these two examples here, so you have the traditional Honeywell or traditional thermostat, which allows you to set the temperature or a temperature range on your thermostat, it's a manual process. It's a very manual process. Whereas if you look at a Nest product, what that's giving you is it's giving you the not just the ability to personalize the way the heating works in your house, to switch it off when you go out of the house, being able to switch it on early through the mobile device, but it also allows you to increase your management of your energy consumption. Now, that value is reflected in the price, and really the Nest device is a piece of hardware. It's not very expensive to purchase. It's the actual software that's the valuable part within that product. Some of the key questions we get asked is, what do I need to implement new business models and revenue models and add to start selling to services rather than products? How do I monetize my solutions and increase renewal rates? How do I move to SaaS and cloud to fulfill my customers' needs? Do I really know my customer base and provide them with a great experience? How do I support scalability and rapid change at low cost? What does it take to manage customer entitlements at multi-sales organizations? So you can see all of these questions are really the businesses thinking about, how do I transform? How do I protect my business in the future? But also, when they're moving to a SaaS and a cloud environment, they've typically moved to a SaaS and cloud environment themselves. So they're using Salesforce.com, or they're using other cloud services. That means that they understand that their customers want to move away from a much more of a CapEx type model to an operational expenditure model, because it gives them more predictability about how they're going to manage their business going forward, which means that you can also add predictability to your business. Now, one word of warning is that what we find is that when introducing a pay-per-use, a subscription, a usage type model, or a SaaS type model, the revenue, because it's moving from a capital expenditure type model to a OpEx model, you do need to make sure that your CFO is very involved in that, because it does have revenue implications and revenue recognition implications. So you just need to balance how you bring that into your market space. So what's the customer expecting? So they're really expecting self-service. So they're expecting, to be able to take responsibility in ensuring their own compliance, but also for you to help them to ensure that they are compliant and they're actually using what they need as a business. And also making sure that it's very, very simple. Licensing and entitlement management should be transparent. It should be just adding value to the customer's experience to be able to buy off you as a producer, and also to be able to provide license administration tools, so again around self-service. And this also makes it much easier for the customer to have an informed decision with you as a software provider. So some of the things we're going to look at is really what we're looking to do is we're looking to simplify, to differentiate, and to derive revenue. So an example of simplification is a camera. So you can ship a single device model, so you can reduce your number of stock keeping units or SKUs for hardware, and you keep all the configurable functions as add-ons. So remotely, you can turn on and off different features. A lot of the customers that we work with will have devices within sites that will be in there for 25 years. So really they want to have the hardware there, but the software to be able to have the intelligence to switch on and off different monetization features. So adding in different floors, for example, increasing and decreasing capacity of the workload within the device. That gives them the ability to manage the network capacity, for example, within a building or within a network, a mobile network. So differentiating, it's about strengthening your competitive edge. So really using the effective entitlement management, it gives you a much quicker time to market. So you can get there before the competitors. We tend to find that we have a lot of customers that come to us who have developed their own licensing systems, and they're normally very good licensing systems. However, it's very difficult for them to change. It's not their core business. So some of the challenges they have is introducing new license models that are more flexible, such as pay-per-use models and usage-based models and SaaS models. It makes it very quick to customize and react very quickly to provide unique, high-value solutions. And part of that fast customization is driven by the data that you're getting out of the devices. It gives you flexible pricing, so it provides you with multiple options. So you can have different pricing options and licensing options for different types of customers, different types of markets. And it's easy to buy. So you really need to make it easy for the customers to buy low and then increase as you go along, so that you can add value as the market develops or as your customers develop. And it also provides niche solutions to differentiate between the software, so that you can actually monetize the value to your specific customers. So we tend to find our customers use licensing and technology as a similar back office support system or business support system as similar to CRM systems and ERP systems. Now they all have their place. So it enables us to provide them with a self-service portal for the customers, to be able to test out new pricing models very quickly, very rapidly, to be able to see which ones are working within their market space, and to capture data on the customer and understand what the usage patterns are, so that they can identify between different product sets and different product lines, cross-sell and upsell opportunities. So hardware businesses aren't software businesses. In fact, hardware businesses traditionally now are becoming much more a software business. They'll find that they have a lot of software engineers that are in their organization that they actually now realize they need to get revenue out of. So this is very similar to the slide that Robin presented earlier, and it's about managing the digital supply chain. So it really is about making sure that you have the ability to go through the whole cycle of the buying cycle and the software cycle. So from order to downloading the software, to configuring and provisioning the device, activating it and understand who's activated the software, capture and report usage, being able to move. So if a piece of hardware is damaged, then you can move the license to a different piece of hardware. Being able to automatically update the software on the device. Being able to understand increase your renewal rates and understand where you can upsell and cross-sell, and being able to analyze the usage. So through all this, you're actually generating recurring revenue. And a lot of the customers that are moving to SaaS-based solutions and usage-based solutions, where you have the recurring revenue, the model changes quite dramatically, and that you have to have a continual relationship with the customer to ensure that you are really providing your customer with the driver to continue doing business with you. So we see a lot of new positions coming into the market, such as customer success directors and VPs of customer satisfaction. So how do I get started? So prepare, and prepare, define, and then execute. So preparing means having your governance team structure, having your sponsors team structure together. So as I said at the beginning, unless you have a strong executive sponsor at the beginning of the project that is overseeing the project or program, transformation program, that it is likely to fail. See software as your business. So it really is where your revenue is going to come from in the future. And identify new opportunities. Have a look at what periphery organizations and markets there are in your industry. Compliance. Make sure that you have a very, very clear compliance statement for your customers. They need to know that they're buying off you, and it's very, very easy to buy off you. Understand what the systems and processes need to change. So define those up front. Don't start changing license models and business models before you've understood what the impact is on the businesses and the systems that support it. And go to market. So you need to educate. You need to educate your customers. You need to educate your distribution channel. And then provide execution. Provide your sales training and compensation. Often one of the first questions we get asked when moving from hardware to a software-based business is that our sales team only understands how to sell hardware. They don't understand how to do a value sale for software. Well, is there a silver bullet? There's not a silver bullet. There are various techniques that you can use. One of the quickest ones is probably and simplest ones is to change the compensation. So there's more value to the sales team to sell software than there is to sell hardware. And launch. But once you've launched, make sure you measure and adapt. As we saw from the software lifecycle, you continuously need to adapt, and that's why it's easy to do with software. So you can introduce new features and new capabilities through the software. And in summary, how do you get started? And our philosophy about how we work with our customers is to think big, think about the vision, think about where you need to get to in the next 5, 10 years, but then start small and make sure that you have small wins that build into the bigger picture to be able to completely transform your business, and then act quickly. Thank you very much for your time, and I will now hand back to Jeremy. Thank you.
Thank you, Eddie. You've given us plenty to think about. In fact, you both have. It's time now for questions from the audience. And taking over from Ed, as I mentioned before, I'm delighted to welcome to the panel Nicole Segera of Flexera. Hi, Nicole.
Hi, Jeremy. Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thanks. I see our attendees have already sent in a lot of questions. We always want more, of course, so do keep sending them in. And if we can't answer every question now, we will, of course, pass them to our speakers afterwards, and they can respond to you offline directly, one-to-one. Nicole, I think the first question should be to you. The question has come in from our audience. We're getting more questions coming in all the time. And bear with me a second because my screen has gone blank. The first question was, is this approach relevant for all industries?
Yes, I think it's a good question. On the long run, I'm sure it is. Certainly, we see some industries adopting it faster, and for some it might take longer. I think, as already mentioned by Eddie, the telco industry is certainly an industry that is adapting very fast, as well as the smart home and building market or computer peripherals. Manufacturing companies in general, they are all thinking about monetization strategies. Sometimes, based on their size and based on their existing business models, it might take them, shorter or longer to get there. But I think they are all about to start. And then for other industries, like, for example, for automotive or for transportation, medical, sometimes we have very long implementation cycles, just due to the hardware production cycles and the release cycles here. For others, like mentioned by Robin, insurance, it might take a bit longer. It might still be a future market, but also, as he mentioned, something that they are looking at already. And maybe one point to add here, building automation is a good example where we also see a development in the consumer space, right? So with the Nest products that Eddie just mentioned in his presentation, we see smart products that are being adopted by the consumer space actually, and this then drives a demand in the industrial automation space, which means the industry has to move there. There is not really a chance to do anything else. So yes, to make the answer short, it is relevant for all industry, but the adoption time is certainly different from industry to industry.
Yeah, that makes sense. Nicole, how do customers usually pay for these services? Do you see a trend in the market?
Yeah, I think the general trend is to move away from something that we call a perpetual model, so from a one-time payment to a consumption-based model or subscription model. So there is definitely a trend towards flexible models, like I mentioned, subscriptions. So users would pay per time or for a certain time. we see a clear trend for pay-per-use, and that is actually also something that we see from the consumer market, but it has more and more, it's being used in the industry market as well, that customers in the end, they only want to pay for what they really use. So they are expecting a lot more transparency in terms of their usage, and then also they want to adjust the payment for what they use on a certain time frame. So yes, I think we see a clear trend towards flexible models, a clear trend to pay for what you really need to have as a customer or want to use. So there's subscription and pay-per-use certainly are the two models we see the most at the moment.
So those are the most regular, yeah. I'd like to ask this of Robin again in a moment, but first of all to you, Nicole, is there an acceptance in the customer base amongst hardware manufacturers actually to pay for these IoT services? Good question.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and a question we are getting very often when we are talking to customers in early stages that are just thinking about developing monetization models for the IoT, and it's not so easy to answer it. But I think the key point here is there has to be an added value, right? So whenever a customer pays for something, he wants to see something in return. So if it's clearly communicated what the added value is, then there is usually also a good acceptance to pay for it. And let me give you a couple of examples, maybe to make it more clear. Let's get back to the example Robin had in his presentation about the MRI product. So if this changes, if the customer is not paying anymore for the hardware upfront, but it's really rather paying for the usage afterwards, you will usually have a high acceptance because each customer will be able to see the value. Even more, with a traditional model, some customers wouldn't even have been able to buy the product because the upfront price was too high. So if they pay for services or for their usage, certainly there is a high acceptance. And then for other examples, it really depends on the model and what customers are getting. For example, if you are using a hardware feature, let's say a camera, for example, and then you can activate more, or a hardware product, a camera, and then you can activate more functionality as you use it, then you might see the added value and pay for it. I think in the industry we sometimes hear problems when a device manufacturer has not really given up on the existing business model, right? So if there's still a high upfront payment for the device and then new services come on top without the end customer, being able to see the value in it, then this might be a problem. And this all comes back to the business model discussion. These models have to change, and really there is a transformation. And if this transformation is being done, then usually in the end there will be a revenue model as part of the new business models that gets acceptance by the customer base. Another connected matter here, and something I want to mention because it's often underestimated actually, is the whole question of the marketing and sales organization of these companies, right? These organizations, they are experts in selling or marketing hardware products, and they are good at it. And now they are being asked to change completely and sell services or sell software, which is also for them really a transformation and a big change and a big step in a direction that they, don't know too much of maybe at the moment. So it really comes down to, getting the message across, getting the training across, making sure that the marketing and sales organization of a device manufacturer is involved in the whole product, gets the value, and is able to get the message across and sell it in the end, if this makes any sense.
Yeah, as I mentioned, I'd like to ask that briefly of Robin. You talk to a lot of hardware suppliers and vendors, makers. Is this your experience that they will actually pay for these IoT services, Robin?
Yes, I mean, I think what Nicole says is absolutely right, that the change in business model here from a purchase of a piece of capital-intensive equipment into a service proposition is not just a financial thing. There's the whole business process re-engineering as well that goes with that. So people that sort of sales staff, for example, that were used to selling just a piece of hardware now have to think about selling a service, and that's a whole different proposition. So it's there's quite a large challenge, I think, in changing the business model often in these kinds of areas, and I think that is quite daunting to some companies, some manufacturers in particular. So, are people looking at this? Yes, they're definitely looking at it. Are they taking this forward? There has been a lot that have been taken forward. I mean, there are lots of examples, even jet engines now, and civil engineering equipment and so forth. So even pumps, and now you can get a pump and you can pay for it on the basis of the amount of pumping that it actually does. So how much liquid is being pumped rather than the actual cost of the pump itself. All of these things require a lot of planning and need, as I say, a change in organisation. Nicole mentioned training of the staff, and that's a really key area. So some see it as more risky than others. Some see it as being more important to change in their environments than others because they see that they can create a differentiation and therefore gain market share. And that's really what it's all about in the end. And I think that because the business model changes so dramatically, it's one of those things where if one changes, then it can put them at a considerable advantage in the marketplace. So then all need to change in that particular sector. And it is very much sector or micro sector by micro sector. So it's going to take a while.
Yeah. Thank you. We're doing okay for time, but we have got a ton of questions coming in, which is great. I'll do my utmost to get through these in the remaining time. There's a really good question here from a communications company asking, this puts greater financial risk on the manufacturers, right? Question mark? Is that true?
Yeah, I think that is at least a good question to ask, and certainly leads in the right direction. That is, yes, the short answer is yes, certainly. When we just sold hardware, then you could calculate what is the income, what you usually sell per year, and then it was easy to predict it. If you're changing to a service-based model, it's harder to predict. It's also harder to predict how long it takes your customers to adopt it. So yes, it is a risk, and that certainly again it requires good planning, and it's not a quick decision to make, right? It's something to look at over years to see how this changes. Maybe also, it's the question. I don't know if I get it right, but the risk would certainly be very high if a company would switch from one day to the other, which usually is something that companies don't do as a whole, right? So usually they start with one product line or one product or one part. And then work their way through the whole product portfolio, which would make it easier to predict what's happening actually, and would also certainly then lower the value. But yes, it is harder to predict, and there is a lot of change to the whole organization, and then also to the financial numbers in the end. So it's a careful decision to make, or a decision that needs to be looked at carefully. Yeah. But I think we see the trend, so it's important to move. And as it is a risk, it's important to think about it, to calculate it. Talk about different models, how they can be implemented, and try to predict what it really means for the business. So we can just encourage companies to have a closer look at the financial aspect of things and to involve a CFO in the discussion early on, because otherwise the risk might get too high.
Yeah, we've got barely 5 minutes left, so I'm going to ask you to each confine your answers to maximum of a minute or less if you can. We've talked about manufacturers and OEMs. Here's a good question from a network OEM. With so many sensor vendors launching multiple IoT products, how should you manage the ecosystem, including sensors, middleware, and applications? That is a huge question, and probably one we could devise an entire webinar to, but I lob that out there for you, Nicole. What do you think?
I think it's hard to answer straight away. As you say, it's a huge question, and I think we see new products, new platforms, new services coming up every day. So there's certainly an ecosystem in a fast development, and there's a lot of consolidation going on at the same time. So it's hard to answer it within a minute. Certainly, we will see a bit more clarity, I would say, in the market within the next few years. I don't know, Robin, if you have a take on that as well.
Yes, I do. So the sensors need to go somewhere. They need to be plugged into something, and it's then that something that they're plugged into that would typically provide the service, and that's often the either a gateway or a platform or a combination of the two. So I think that puts greater emphasis on the platform being a provider of a range of services that are then made available perhaps to a higher level application or charged for in its own right. But this is going to be the general situation moving forward. We're going to have data coming from a large variety of sources, and we're going to have an increasing amount of that data coming from those sources as well. So the platform and the application that sits on top of that need to take account of that and to provide flexible means of payment as the requirements, as there is a requirement.
Thank you. We've got barely 2 minutes left, so let's whiz through what we can in the time. This was touched on earlier, but out of your experience, Nicole, which parts of a company and which roles within a company are usually involved in this kind of project?
Good question, and that question we see very often when we start. I'll try to make it short. The very short answer is many roles and a lot of parts of a company. But first of all, to be a bit more clear, executive buy-in is crucial and absolutely necessary. Starting such a project without executive buy-in is a high risk, something we wouldn't recommend. And then, in the project, we usually see product management playing a big role, as well as R&D departments. Sales and marketing should be part of it, are not always, but they should be part of such a project. And then operations in the end, because they need to make sure that it works with the system. There's something like, ERP and CRM integration to talk about, and other operational topics as well. And then we had said already, finance is definitely an important part of our company that should be part of it. So usually we see, cross-functional teams being set up to work on such a project. And sometimes also a different approach. We see that a company sets up their own IoT departments or own roles that take care of the digital transformation project, and then they might have an overlay role. But that's not very often, but it's starting to happen.
Okay. Last question, and this is one to both of you, briefly, if you will. It's an interesting example. Could a door lock company charge a home owner for each time the customer locks their door? How is this adding value? Nicole first.
I think it depends on the business model again. So if the customer can see the value, for example, if he has just thinking about it, I never thought about it before. If the customer would have an application on his smartphone and could see that the door is locked, so he had more control, he might think about it and might see a value in paying for each time he locks the door. So again, I think it really comes down to the business model and what the customer, who in the end has to pay, gets out of it. But this could be, an app, mobile app connected to it. Could be some added value. Robin, I don't know if you.
Well, I'd say that it's got to be a very expensive lock that if you're paying it for it on a pay-per-use basis, because normally you would buy a lock and then forget about it. So it's got to have the lock has got to have quite a lot of value add in its own right, I think, to to make it transfer from just a single purchase to being a pay-per-use. But theoretically, you can apply the model to anything, but it's just a question of where people will see the value in that pay-per-use. So I think, yeah.
Thank you both. I'm going to have to call a halt to it there. We do have other questions we will put to our speakers to answer offline. As always, the aim of this webinar has been to try and hear more about the business tools and skills needed, in this case, to monetize your IoT offering. And I do think we've uncovered some of the pain points, but the IoT is somewhere new and it's growing, and, well, we're all still learning, and we will be for some time. Talking of time, we are almost out of it. So I'd just like to remind you, everyone, please keep an eye on our website at iot-now.com, because in the next 48 hours you'll be able to stream this webinar from the site. And meanwhile, you'll find the latest news there, plus blogs, videos, and the hot list of contracts won. It just remains for me to say a very big thank you to our speakers. Robin Duke-Woolley of Beecham Research. Thank you, Robin.
Thank you very much, Jeremy.
And thank you too to Nicole Segera of Flexera Software for taking everyone's questions. Thanks, Nicole.
Thank you, Jeremy. It was nice to be here. Thanks a lot.
Great to have you. And most of all, ladies and gentlemen, I'd really like to thank you for joining us, wherever you are today. Keep safe, and we really do appreciate the time you spent with us. From everyone here at IoT Now, we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Bye for now.